Glyph asks this question. What's the difference between British English and American English? Now, I think this is a really interesting question. Glyph, good question. Interesting name, good question. And so let's go through this. Now, as you know, English is not the same everywhere, right? It certainly is not. English is different around the world. You have non-native English, accents, pronunciation, Chinglish, French English, Japanese English, all of that. And then you have native English speakers, the United States, Canada, well, not all of Canada. Part of Canada is French-speaking, or we could also call it Francophone. The UK, did I say that already? South Africa, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. Am I leaving anything out? I might be. Anyway, regarded as native English-speaking countries. But is English the same in all of those places? Heck no. No way. English is different in native English-speaking countries too. And I've said this before, if I go to the UK or Australia and I listen to people, there will be many things that I don't completely understand. Now, the reason I don't understand is probably culture, right? I don't understand everything about the culture. Maybe I don't know some of the references, and I don't know the movies. I don't know everything about maybe the history or whatever. Memes, M-E-M-E-S, memes. So I don't know everything. I don't understand everything, but I can learn it pretty quickly. So that's part of it. But actually, there are three different aspects, three different things, mainly, that make up the difference between American and British English, which is what we're going to talk about, what we're talking about now. It's what we're talking about now. That's what we're talking about. It's the thing we're talking about. The three different things are, generally speaking, pronunciation, and then idioms, or expressions, common phrases and expressions people say, and words, specific words that are different for the same thing. Idioms may be specialized phrases that maybe British people say that Americans don't even know, or they've heard but they don't use them. And then the words are, this is the thing we're talking about. British people say this word for it. Americans say that word for it. So that's the difference between them. All right, so let's start with pronunciation. Now, I have British-speaking friends. I have been to the UK, but I wouldn't say that I'm a professional. I wouldn't say that I know a lot about British English. Well, I don't know enough to say I can confidently do a British accent. I can try my best. I can probably fail. But I want to talk a little bit about the main differences, or some of the differences, just so that you can get a sense for the pronunciation difference. There's more than what I'm going to mention, but let's just talk about some of the basics. Okay, so we can say accent. Okay, instead we don't say, oh, the pronunciation difference between British and American English. We don't say that among English speakers. We say, oh, you have a British accent. You have an American accent. You have an Australian accent. Pronunciation is what we use when we're teaching English. English teachers will use that. Okay, so the first one, and this is the one that generally people notice most, which is most obvious to people, and that is R. When Americans say the R sound, they curl their tongues way up. It's very R-y. Can I say that? Is that a word? America. We say R very strongly. When British people say it, and there are also different accents within England, of course, but when British people say R, generally speaking, there is a bit less of an R sound, as Americans would think of an R sound. It's flatter, the tongue is flatter, and it sounds like oh sometimes with a flatter tongue. So, for example, the word car. Americans might say car. And a British person might say, and again, there are different accents within England as well, ca. Now, again, there are variations, but that's the general difference overall. Okay, so there's that R sound, right? Heart, American. Heart. Hot. And that might not be a perfect accent. I don't know. But that's the idea, okay? Now, there are some things that are vowels that are basic differences too. Not in all cases, but in some. For example, the short A. An American will say in the back of their mouths, more. And a British person will bring it to the front, ah, the same thing. Ah. That's a little exaggerated, but it's just so you can hear the difference. One is in the back, the American one, and the front, the British one. So, for example, B-A-T-H, B-A-T-H. Americans will say bath, ah. You can hear ba, bath. British person might say bath, ah. So there's the ah and the ah and right? That's one difference. Okay, now again, my pronunciation there is not perfect, but you can hear that. Let's say, for example, father. Now, some Americans will say father, father. And a British person might bring it slightly closer to the front, father. Although they might say father with a sound instead of an sound. So that's a difference too. It's that A sound, that short A sound, can be different between British and American English. Now, I just want to go over a couple more things very quickly. Another one is a word that's pronounced differently. And that one is aluminum. Americans will say aluminum, which to me is just every sound, right? But British people will add an ium to it. And if you've ever seen Apple advertisements, then you will have seen Johnny Ive saying this. He's very famous for it because he's British. He says aluminium. So Australians and British people tend to say aluminium. Americans say aluminum. So aluminium and aluminum. That's a difference. We also sometimes say words that start with H differently. So Americans might say herb, H-E-R-B. We often take out the H sound, herb. And a British person might say herb, with an H sound actually there. Okay, so that's also a difference. Now there are some things that are common with an H at the beginning, like hour. British people say our, H-O-U-R. Americans say our, H-O-U-R. So that's the same. One more that I want to mention very quickly is civilization and civilization. Actually, and I'm pretty sure about this, Americans tend to use the schwa sound more. If you haven't seen my video on the schwa sound, go check it out. The schwa sound is an unstressed sound. A-E-I-O-N-U can be the schwa sound. It's So for a lot of words, Americans will use the schwa sound a lot. For example, words like civilization. We say that's the schwa. Civil, and then civil, that's also schwa. Civilization, very relaxed. Sounds like civilization. Now, British people might say civilization. So they're actually saying the vowels a little bit more. Now, that's not true for every word, but generally speaking, especially for the I's, as you heard, British people will use the schwa sound less, and Americans will use it more. Okay, so that's pronunciation. That's how pronunciation works generally, and there are other examples, plenty more examples, between British and American English. Now, I said there are three. It's pronunciation, there's words, and there's idioms, local expressions. So how about words? If you haven't seen my other video on this, make sure you watch it. I have a video about pronunciation and words in England and the United States. Now, we may be talking about one thing, but a British person will use this word, and an American will use that word. We're talking about the same thing, but we use two different words. There are so many examples. A simple one. Americans will say pants. P-A-N-T-S, pants. British person may often say instead trousers. Pants, trousers. Americans might say, for all things that are sweet and disc-shaped, cookie, 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 cookie. A British person may say, for many of those things, biscuit, although they also use the word cookie. Biscuit, cookie, biscuit, biscuit, cookie. Americans use cookie for everything. And we use the word biscuit, but a biscuit is a different thing. It's not sweet. It's not sweet. Okay, so it's different. Okay. How about truck? Americans use the word truck. Truck, to talk about anything that has something in the back to carry things, an open space in the back, whether it's huge or small, right? A pickup truck, a big truck. Well, for those medium-sized trucks, a British person will say lorry, a lorry, a lorry. Yes, we don't use the word lorry at all in America. We don't use that word. We have to learn it from England. When we watch British TV shows, we might say, what's that? It's a lorry. Oh, it's a lawyer. Lorry. A lorry. Oh, okay. I got it. I understand. So I learned that later. I didn't know that. I didn't grow up with that word. Maybe, for example, queue. Q-U-E-U-E. Which, by the way, is one of the only words that has 4 vowels in a row. Q-U-E-U-E. Americans rarely use the word queue. In fact, I've met plenty of Americans who don't know it. Let's queue up, I said once to an American. Let's queue up. Queue up. Let's stand in the queue. And they said, what? Do what? Let's get in line. Oh, okay. So Americans will say, get in line. Get in line. Okay, so that's the second difference. There are many other words that are different between both of us. Some of them are used by both. For example, truck, but used differently, right? British people say the word cookie. They use it, but it's only for the big ones that are very sweet. Okay. Now, there's one more, and that is idioms, local idioms, okay? Local expressions. And these come up for all kinds of different reasons. History, right? The local culture, TV shows, movies. They come up naturally. And often you can't really tell where exactly it came from. And it doesn't really matter as long as you learn it. Now, I have a course about American idioms and expressions. Actually, I have 4 courses on that topic. So if you're interested in learning American idioms and expressions, you can learn over 200 from my courses. So check out the links in the description if you're interested in that. But we'll say things in America that British people won't say, and there will be things that people say in England that Americans don't say and sometimes don't even know. Yeah. So I'll give you a quick example, and I learned this one later. Pop out. To pop out for something is to go out briefly, to go out briefly, to get something. I'm going to pop out for a snack. We usually won't say that in America. We'll say go out for a snack. So pop out for a bit would be generally a British expression. I've heard British people say cheap as chips. Cheap as chips, which means very cheap. We don't say that one. I learned that one later. I had a friend who always used to say, what's cheap as chips? Oh, cheap as chips. Okay. Chuffed. Chuffed. Chuffed means really excited about something, happy about something. Chuffed. I'm so chuffed about that. Okay. That means you like it. You enjoy it. You're excited. Americans won't say chuffed. I learned chuffed a few years ago. So, Americans definitely use different expressions and definitely don't know some British expressions. All right, so those are generally 3 differences between British English and American English, expressions and idioms, words that are different, and pronunciation. This is just the beginning, so if you're interested in these differences, make sure you do more research. Watch British TV shows and American TV shows, and you can get a better sense for these, but you have to listen. You have to develop your ear.